So, welcome to Cracking Legal Innovation, the podcast where we go behind the scenes with the people who are reshaping how legal work gets done. My name's Anthony Seale, CEO at Legatics, and I'm joined by my co host, Daniel Porus, our Chief Commercial Officer. For decades, law firms have structured their work around matters and legal problems. But what if the client's real challenge isn't the legal problem itself, but something deeper that requires a fundamentally different approach? So, to discuss the shift from services to solutions, we're joined by Jana Blount, Director of Client Solutions and Digital Strategy for EMEA and APAC at Norton Rose Fulbright. And Jana leads the development of client centric digital products and legal service solutions, collaborating with partners, clients, the Norton Rose Fulbright Transform team to design new service delivery models. She's had a fantastic career spanning law firms, consultancy, delivering industry wide transformation programs, and her previous role included building the radical change team at DLA Piper, which was a multidisciplinary team powering sort of AI services and really embedding design thinking methodology across the firm. And I think that's something we'd like to focus on today. So, in this conversation, we'll explore what design thinking looks like in practice in law firms, how we can build multidisciplinary teams that use that as a method to deliver value, and actually tackle innovation from not so much the technology that you might implement, but with really good framing of the problem from the start using design thinking. So, a really big welcome to Jana.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So, for listeners who may not be familiar with the term design thinking or have maybe heard it but don't quite know what it is, what would you say design thinking is?
Yeah. So this has been around for decades, actually. I think it's been interesting to see, I guess, in the last decade, legal to try to embrace it and think about how we can be leveraging this, in essence, process. And it's a process to identify the next new thing, right? The genesis of design thinking was more in the product space. So big companies like Apple, for instance, would use design thinking to figure out that, hey, what actually people would want is an iPod or an iPhone, a little thing with a circle in the middle. Why did that resonate? They found some unmet need or desire that no one was even quite articulating yet. And they honed in on that and then created a whole multi-billion dollar industry around this. So it's really focused on just that. It's the unmet or even unarticulated needs or desires of people, figuring out what those can be, and then designing a solution or product sometimes, but if we take a step back, a solution that addresses that need and does something with it.
That's fascinating. Thanks. I mean, I guess the first question I have, if that's the case, how does someone know that they even need some design thinking if it's a bit of an unmet need? How do clients come to you in terms of what they think the problem might be?
So at first, when I was rolling out design thinking at DLA, it was about that process. How do we get more people to be able to facilitate design thinking sessions with their clients to come up with these new ideas, new products, new solutions for our clients? Actually, as time progressed, we realized it wasn't really about everyone being able to come up with a new product or an idea. It was really about that underlying why, right? So, how can we enable, and it switched, my whole strategy there switched to how can I enable and empower everyone in DLA to ask different questions, to think about what else might be underpinning this initial ask or requirement from a client. So, a lot of times, as you point out, Anthony, our clients weren't saying, I have no idea what's going on. Give me something. They would come to us with, I need to do innovation, or I need a new tech solution, or I need a CLM system, right? And it was on us to say, well, tell me more about that. Like, why do you think you need that CLM system? What are the issues or the challenges or the problems or opportunities you're trying to create through this system? And going multi layers deeper into that. So sometimes it was a CLM system and we had realized how it needed to be set up or which system suit them best. But a lot of times it was, there's a lot of other things going on, right? Actually, it might actually be something completely different than a CLM system that would solve your problem or create these opportunities that you're seeking. So, it was about that. And I guess one of the things that you guys know, Dom Judge, he was my office partner at DLA. And the thing he used to say is the three wise men. not wise, WISE, but wise. And he had that as a little post-it on his desk to remind himself, ask why at least 3 times, right? Go deeper, go deeper, go deeper, so that you actually understand what's underpinning this request or this initial ask from our clients.
So I find that interesting when people think design thinking, like so often it's, you imagine big rooms with post-it notes. Is it all post-it notes, or is it, you were sort of talking about some of the training around, asking the right questions, going deeper by asking why and going a level below. But maybe can you talk a bit more about what the sessions with the clients actually look like when you are doing the design thinking?
There was a very poignant session with a global bank early on in my DLA days. And that was one where the client came to me and said, Jana, we need some new tech. And that was it. Like literally, we need tech. And okay, okay. There's a lot of tech. So how about I start to understand a little bit more around what kind of tech you want, what you're trying to achieve, and I can tailor my recommendations to you, which then turned into this GC gathering all of his legal directors together, of which there were about 8. And I said, look, I would just love to hear what you're trying to achieve, what challenges you're trying to address. And so for an hour, I just took copious notes of all these different things of what their strategy was, what they were trying to do in the business within their specific legal departments or teams, and what some of the challenges were that they were facing. And after that hour, I said, no one, no one said 2 words, efficiency, and no one said tech and any of that, right? So, but actually, there was a lot more here that you guys were trying to do. And if you'll let me, I'm going to go away and I'll synthesize this. And I'm going to come back and then we're going to have an entire other session around how we might empower and enable you to achieve those goals. And they said, great. And so then that turned into a half day where there was a lot of post-its, but it wasn't about tech at all. And actually, one of the key takeaways was the department leaders coming back and saying, we actually need to do these types of sessions with our business partner, right? And so then it turned into me providing training and coaching on how they could run their own design thinking sessions internally. Because what they really realized was, as much as they were trying to create efficiency, as much as they wanted to create value, what they really wanted to better understand was what value meant to their business teams and business partners and colleagues in the wider bank. And then they could really think about what else they could be doing, how they would switch processes, and everything else in other ways of tackling those challenges, or as I like to say, framing those opportunities, really.
You were sort of talking about some of the people who were in the room on the client side. So you mentioned that for the first session, it was those, the directors, maybe your primary contacts. They in turn then found that it was so valuable, they wanted to go deeper into the value part and the other elements of the business. Where do you find it works? Like, who should be in the room and how do you find it works best ideally? Like, would you ideally want all those people, like the business partners on the client side in the room? Does it work better in this way? And then as a follow-on the like law firm side, who should be on the room in the law firm side as well?
So it would not have worked to have brought in the business partners or colleagues into some of those earlier sessions. Like we needed to really explore deeper with that smaller subset of humans to think about what are we really trying to do and who do we need to bring in and whose problems are we trying to solve. But another example was I've run a session for well, I'll narrow it into one, an airline. And they were thinking about the contracting process. And actually, what they did was my team went out and we interviewed a lot of their stakeholders across a lot of, I think it was like 6 different departments within the airline to try to get a sense of how they were experiencing the contracting process. Then we brought back all of that insight into a room, and it was a multidisciplinary room. We had legal, we had compliance, we had some of the key stakeholders from the other departments that were regularly interfacing with legal. And we all collectively thought about, well, what were the main challenges? What was going really well, actually? And then what were some of the challenges? And then prioritizing that and thinking about, well, how do we supercharge what's going well? Or how do we tackle some of these key issues that we have so that they had a collective collective ideation session, and then they can collectively create those solutions going forward, because right away legal realized that they needed that buy-in, they needed that input, because whatever legal did, they needed to do that change management piece as well, and needed everyone to get on board with this new way of interfacing, interacting with them, and getting these contracts completed sooner or quicker.
It feels so different from the world of traditional like legal delivery of legal services. Um, I must say, like, one of the things that really frustrated me about being a lawyer was, I thought before I trained was that I was going to get these amazing insights into all these different clients' businesses. It was going to teach me so much about business. You're going to be at the center of all these big transactions, and you'd find out why they were happening. Why did the organization want to buy this other company? Like, how did that fit into their strategy? And you were so far removed from that as a lawyer, and that really frustrated me because I thought, um, I don't know. I thought I'd get that insight as a lawyer, and I found myself really stuck in this like narrow kind of execution. I mean, I was quite, I never got like super senior, so that was probably a problem as well. But I felt like I never really kind of understood the client's business, and this just feels so different from that. Not even just getting more context to sort of why they're doing something, but going deep, even into exploring like your clients' relationships. It sounds a hell of a lot more interesting to me than being sort of really narrowly defined. Um, I'm curious as to almost the interface with the sort of legal services part of the business and how that works.
I think that's been one of the things that's bothered me most with the way innovation has been framed or pitched or positioned in various law firms, is this kind of complete split or bifurcation of, we do legal services, those people do innovation, right? We're going to do and provide you legal advice, and that team over there is going to talk to you about some cool tech, right? Where I've felt that I've made the most impact, and the projects that have been most exciting for me has been, and I guess I didn't answer this in your previous question, Dan, so going back to that, is when it has been an actual rethinking with the lawyers on both sides, right? So the in-house legal team and the internal firm lawyers, of what does this experience look like? How can we really rethink the delivery of this legal advice in a new way, of which we need to think about the digital component, but we also really do need to think about what that interface looks like between the firm and the client, and how we deliver this legal advice in a different way. So, and that's really where I'm pushing a lot of the conversations now at NRF as well, is thinking about, it's not about going in and, legal or partners, you pitch what you do, you pitch your solutions, you pitch your expertise, and then I pitch what I do and my expertise. It's really with that client focused lens, thinking about the problems that we're trying to solve, and then knitting this together as a cohesive solution for the client, right? We're going to address this challenge, and if you think of us as a platform, we have all this different expertise, we have all these different technical skills, whether it's legal or specific legal expertise and technical skills, but we also have this capability to create new products, solutions, and leverage the brains within my team. So how do we stitch this together so that it's a cohesive solution that really addresses what our client is needing to do internally?
So when you're doing those external engagements and you're engaging internally with your key stakeholders, who exactly are the key stakeholders that you want to win over? And how are you going about kind of winning those people over to, because this must be such a different way of thinking for these, senior partners or, managing partner in a firm potentially as well. So how do you think about that, and who are you actually engaging with?
So I think, one of the main reasons are, so let me take a step back. A lot of people have asked, why did you go back to a law firm, Jana? Right? So, I was at DLA for 7.5 years. I left. I had 2 years of doing my independent consulting and doing a wide range of different projects in-house and for law firms. And the thing that resonated with me, or for me, at DLA and now at NRF, is the fact that I had that senior C-suite buy-in, and buy-in, really, to get my voice out there, be different, challenge the status quo, and do something different in this space, and engage people in a different way, our clients and our partners. And then who am I really trying to win over? Yeah, it's a lot of the senior partnership. It's a lot of the ones that have those client relationships. And how am I trying to do that? It is about the clients, right? And the partners that have those real deep client relationships get it. Fundamentally, they are understanding that it's beyond here's some advice. We're done. It's about how do we really get embedded in what you're trying to achieve? How do we understand the strategy? How do we understand even the nuance of how you want the advice to look? Is it a PowerPoint? Is it bullet point? Is it a 20-page memorandum? It's usually never the last one, but understanding all those things are actually key things that make or break a relationship, that really drive that experience that a client has of our law firm and of our lawyer. So pitching what I do as a way to further what they're doing, to further their objectives, to further that relationship piece is really how I do that. And that is strongly what I believe. I don't have an agenda that sits separately from what the firm is trying to do, right? It's very important for me to understand where are we going as a law firm. Then how do I use innovation in my team to supercharge that, to drive us in that direction? How are you, Dan, trying to interact and develop your client relationships? All right, well, how can my team further supercharge that and get in there to rethink what that could look like? So it's aligning what I do with the overarching objectives team and strategy of the firm, as well as those senior partners that are driving and thinking about those relationships as well.
It sounds fantastically exciting from a client perspective. I think if there's one bit of feedback we always heard from clients, it was like, be more commercial, be more commercial, be more commercial. And I remember as a junior lawyer, you'd gone to law school, you'd learn all this like technical law, you'd learn, you kind of got deep into like how to analyze case law and then how to do contracts and things like that. And the clients kept just saying like, be more commercial, be more commercial. And I think it always felt like a big jump to actually kind of understand what that meant. I don't know if asking the whys is hitting on that need, and this is really an extension of that.
It's hitting the whys, and the other thing that I was teaching in that second iteration or third or latest iteration of design thinking was I switched it. And as we were saying before we went on here, it's been a long time since I've actually spoken about design thinking as a thing in of itself, right? It was really, I made a very cognizant effort around trying to embed some of the techniques and tools of design thinking into the way I would talk about things in general, or into the way we would just do things. So it's asking the why, but the other kind of, if we go back to what design thinking is, there's this understand and empathize piece. So really get to the root of what's going on and what's underpinning what your client is wanting and needing, right? Then there's this piece around ideation of like, all right, if we really understand what's going on and this need, what are all the ways that we might be able to solve that problem? And that's where you get the post-its and there's like there's no bad ideas. There's nothing crazy, like the more divergent thinking in that space. And then that last piece will go back to, well, let's test some of our thinking. Let's see where we might have made some assumptions that might be wrong or might be right. And I think that last piece is really crucial as well when delivering legal work or legal advice. I think so many times lawyers are in this space, not just lawyers, professionals. You've seen this question before, you've done it before, you're just going to deliver what you've done, right? Because you know it. But there's a part there where I try to ask people to pause, which is just play it back. Test that assumption. Is it that this solution is actually what the client wants? Is there a quick way of saying, hey, these are just to play back what I think I've understood. These are the 5 issues I'm going to be tackling, and it's going to look like that. Are we on the same page? Yes or no? Done. Go on and go forth, right? So many times what you hear are legal teams going off and spending a really long time doing what they think from their experience is what the client has asked for, and then it's just not right, right? But then instead of playing it back and doing a little bit of testing of their assumptions, they have to go back and then they re-assume that they understood it the second time, and God forbid they've not got it right the second time, right? So it's around this testing of assumptions.
So we've used design thinking to frame the problem. We've asked our whys. We found out what we think the problem really is. What happens next?
Yeah. So that second part around ideation, right? And I think this is where um, can be a bit of a challenge, right? Because what you do want there, and as I said, it's the space of divergent thinking. And there's a lot I think that law firms can do to get more divergent in their thinking. I think a lot of times in the legal industry, we look at each other, and we have a lot of lawyers trying to solve legal issues for lawyers without really thinking about any other really industries, right? Or just really actually challenging ourselves to thinking about really the question, the challenge that we're trying to solve, and thinking laterally of how have other industries solved this, or what are just crazy ways, like how would a 5-year-old solve this, and allowing yourself that space to be different, to be crazier, to be divergent before narrowing down. I think now more than ever, right? Everyone, the big question with Gen AI that everyone keeps coming back to is it's eating what I do, right? It's taking away my tasks. What's going to be left for me? Well, I mean, this is now more than ever, use some design thinking. Really think about what is that value in these unmet needs of our client, and how might we deliver that or create that? What are those opportunities that we haven't ever taken advantage of before? And let's really think about how we can create the solution for that. Once you've gotten that and you have multiple solutions, you shouldn't ever come out with just one. It's about quantity, not quality at that time. Then you're going to start to say, oh, what's the nugget of gold that's in this idea? What do we really want to do with that? How might we actually deliver that? Let's test some of these assumptions. Did we get it right with our client? And it's this experimentation phase. I think people tend to skip this and go straight into business plan. And it's way too early. You're not business planning now. It's, I think lawyers should actually be really great at this. If we were to do this idea, what are 10 assumptions that we've made that could make or break it, right? Well, we've assumed that people understand this. We assume that people would know their password. We assume that people would, and you just layer them all out, and you could very quickly test those, A story that I've told before, but I think it's worth repeating on this just testing assumptions piece, because it's so important, is a global law firm, not one I've worked with for, rolled out a new finance system. They worked with a Big Four to do a multi-year, multi-million pound rollout of this new finance system. At the end of the, build and everything else, they were ready to launch. And one of the consultants had a training session for hundreds of the lawyers and their secretaries. And he said, all right, everybody, really excited to show you how this works. I just need someone to tell me a matter number. Just like anyone, give me a matter number. It doesn't matter. We're not going to go into the matter. Nothing confidential is going to be shown. Then finally, Dan gets this already. He's laughing because he knows where this is going. Someone raises their hand and they said, we don't know matter numbers. We do like project names or client names. And the whole premise of this entire system was based on the fact that everyone would know a matter number. You could put that in and it would kickstart all of it, all the processes, right? And you could think, well, obviously why they chose a matter number, because this is this one thing that carries throughout all the different systems. A really great way, a really great data point to tie everything together to give you all this amazing insight. But my God, how easy would that have been to just go to any lawyer in that entire firm, sit next to them and be like, how do you look up a case? How do you look up a matter? And they would have quickly seen it was not by the number.
That story really resonated, Jana, about the... But it was making me think as well. I think there are so many assumptions that we make as lawyers within firms around what the client wants. And firms talk about being client-centric. But what I find a lot of the time is client centricity is basically making assumptions about what the client wants, as opposed to actually asking some of the questions and actually finding out some of the basics. To your point, like it might be, how do they want to receive their legal services? But also sometimes, particularly in big law, and that was, where I started out, client centricity almost goes into like over servicing the client. So you get an engagement and it's about, all right, we're going to turn this around. we got an engagement at 8 p.m. at night. We're going to have this on their desk at 5 a.m. in the morning. Did we ask the client whether they need that at 5 a.m. in the morning, whether they even want it that quickly? Maybe they're going to be out for the next week. Is that really the thing that's most important to the client? Also, the amount of work that goes in, like so often we would do more work than the client had even asked us to do just to show that we're going above and beyond. Whereas sometimes speed might not be the most important thing. It might be being more focused in your approach and spending less time. Maybe cost is the limiting factor here. And actually that would be more important if you were to take a bit more time on it. So I'm just interested in your reflections on, you sort of talked about it in that context for that particular engagement, but are you seeing these engagements where you do, I don't know, really dive into what client centricity means within firms?
Yeah. I mean, do I want to see more of it? Absolutely. Do I see it already? Yes. I think there's a big shift in, when I sometimes talk about, ask why, and a lot of the pushback I'll get from especially more senior partners is, but I'm the expert. I should know. I should know the answer. And I'm like, well, I'm not telling you to ask about the legal piece, right? Yes, you are the legal expert, but it's really about understanding the delivery, the experience, the mitigating factors, like who is this ending up going to, right? Is it to the board? Is it to internal stakeholders in the marketing team? I don't know, but like without that context, you're going to miss a lot, right? And all the things that you just said, Dan. And so I think the big challenge here, or the thing that I have found most challenging, is reframing what good client centricity looks and feels like, right? And I think a lot of law firms think they come to us because we know everything and we shouldn't have to ask a single question. We are the bearers of all knowledge, right? For me, it's always been when I felt like someone really got me, right? Like you understand exactly what it is that I'm trying to do. So now I can trust that you're going to do it in the way that I want, right? And if you don't take the time or even acknowledge that you get exactly what I want and why I want it, then I'm not going to have that security. I'm not going to feel like I can just relinquish control over whatever it is, whether it's a redesign of my cabinetry or, the memorandum I'm asking you to write for my board. It can look like anything, but if I don't think you got me, or I don't think you get what I really want and need from this, I will not feel comfortable. That won't be a great client experience for me. It will still feel a bit like, ugh, let's see what comes back, right? And that's not a good experience. You never want your client to feel like this, we'll see how they do, right? And so I think it's really about reframing what good client centricity, what a great client experience feels like. And, I think the other thing to really think about is people like talking about themselves. People like talking about what they want. People like talking about what they're trying to do. And so actually part of that great experience can be offering them that space to tell you, right? The other thing that we're providing our clients when we ask those questions is giving them space to actually think about things, right? Because they are really busy humans. And when you think about why and you think about who asks why a lot, I think the first thing you think about are like toddlers, right? And if you've had a kid and you've been questioned, and I get questioned on all of my choices every day by my two preteens now, like everything I do is questionable according to them. But like why did you do it that way? Why are you wearing that? Why did you do your hair like that? But actually, if you think about it, it's not something that you necessarily would think about. And sometimes our clients aren't thinking about why they've asked you a certain question, or what they really want from it, or what good would look like. So we're also helping them really kind of frame the challenge for themselves and get a new perspective.
Thank you. That's so refreshing. I'm curious, given that, where you see the balance in the market. Is this something that you think there's more going out to clients and educating them on what's possible and what design thinking is, and asking more whys? Or do you think like legal service delivery has just traditionally been broken and lawyers just haven't been getting their clients, they haven't been asking those questions? Where do you feel the gap is most?
So many gaps.
Is it all broken everywhere? Is it completely
There's more
legitimate
than one
answer as
gap.
well? nobody's understanding each other, nobody's listening in the way they want, like it's all broken.
I don't think it's all broken. I think, and when the way I talk to lawyers internally in the firm, and even to our clients as well, there I think 95% of lawyers would say that they want to deliver exceptional service to their clients, whether that's internally into a business or from external law firm to in-house, right? So there is this desire to do a really great job. I think we're all like type A personalities, most of us, right? So I think the gap becomes around understanding what exceptional looks like and could feel like, and understanding that there's other ways of delivering that could even be more exceptional, right? Because we're hitting more needs. And even that education piece is something I've been thinking a lot of recently, and especially in my new role. It's um, there's education of the clients as to what's possible, how you can interact with law firms, and even in AI. Everyone's on a different journey with AI, starting to just, rolling it out and supercharging their own products, right? So there's a huge education piece there that I think a lot of innovation people need to think about how we fill that gap or what that gap looks like. And actually talking about multidisciplinary, I've been trying to speak to my knowledge team and the L&D team, because it's not just about innovation, it's education, period, right? So there is that. And then yeah, I think really, and this is what Gen AI has enabled more conversations and openness around, is really rethinking how we create that value, right? Internally for law firms, and more partners are now coming, to speak to me saying, how can we explore this? What else could this look like? Because if these pieces or this type of work is going away, what else can we be getting into?
So Jana, with that education journey, things probably come up that do question the status quo in terms of the traditional business model of a law firm. And maybe you're doing a sort of co-creation process with some partners in the room along with the client. Ideas are coming up that do challenge the status quo. How do you then navigate that if it's almost challenging the traditional, billable hour and the way in which services are being delivered?
If it's client driven, it's client driven, right? I think most partners are going to say, well, if the client wants it, we're going to do it, right? Most law firms, any department is like, well, the client's asking for it, we're going to be doing it. I think there's also more and more of a recognition that if we're not doing it, someone else could or can or will, right? And actually the profile of our competitors is also changing, right? So it's not just, well, you could look at competition in a lot of different angles, which I have. It typically was other global law firms. Well, there's a lot more global law firms now, and there probably will be even more global law firms in the next couple years, right, with all these mergers. So that type of competition is growing and changing. Okay, so then you can just look at law firms. Well, it's not just law firms anymore. It's also ALSPs that are coming in, and they're being able to move up the chain, because they are, some of them are much more tech enabled, and are bringing those different expertise and techniques and digital capabilities together, right? So that's another type of competition that's coming in. And if we're very honest, it's some of the tech providers. They're coming into this space, and they're disintermediating and disaggregating that relationship, and really they're really shifting how we interface with our clients and the type of work and where we play in those spaces. So competition is shifting so rapidly and looks so differently today than it did 2 years ago. And if we're not switching and we're not looking at new revenue streams and we're not thinking about how we shift what we do, someone else is going to take it anyways. So, and I think the fallacy that I really try to push against is, it's not that we're all fighting over this tiny sliver, right? I think what we always forget about is the highest grossing law firm only took up about 1% of the entire legal spend that's available, right? There's a massive, massive market of unmet legal needs. If we talk about unmet needs, my God, if you just look at legal needs, there's millions of pounds just left on the table that no one, millions, probably even closer to billions of pounds, dollars left of unmet legal needs that no one's addressing. So we have this mentality of like, oh, it's this piece, it's this piece, it's this piece. And we're also concerned about who's going to take that piece and who's doing that piece. When actually, if we took a step back and really looked at the opportunity, it's ginormous, right? Who's doing that? How do we address that? What does that look like?
I love that concept because I agree with that. It's not like there's like a finite pie and everyone's fighting over how are we going to divide up the pie. It's actually, there could be an even bigger pie. It's just identifying what can we do to identify that.
There's so much like fear-driven thinking in law firms. I think you're trained to be risk averse the whole time, and like this is fantastic. You're expanding the market, you're delivering new services, and you're doing it maybe because a competitor is going to do it first. And we see that sometimes. It's like, look, we offer you a brilliant way to go and manage your legal transactions. This is something fantastic you can do for your law firm, for your client. And sometimes the biggest driver is actually that a competitor's done it, not that like we want to move forwards.
One thing I am interested, just to take a slightly different tack, is we've talked a lot about the sort of design thinking from a like client perspective, and I agree. There's like big opportunity to sort of expand, the opportunity there, but a lot of innovation within firms is more inwardly looking, like what's going to help the lawyers to do their work, more effectively. It can also be expensive, right? If people then have more capacity, then they can do more of this work that is client facing as well. But do you find those same principles for legal design thinking apply internally when focusing on the users being, the lawyers or business professionals within a firm, as it does what you were talking about client side as well?
It should, right? I think the other thing that I get frustrated with is when people talk about how do we do what we're currently doing faster? How do we just automate this? Just automate this. Well, should you? Like why automate that? Is that the thing that we should be doing? Is that the ideal process? Like, are we just making crappy processes faster? Right? I mean, we really should be rethinking and who should be doing that process, right? So there's so many questions there that should be answered before you just get on with this technology can automate that. And if there's anything that I keep saying to the lawyers everywhere is, actually, what lawyers do day in and day out is we answer shoulds, right? Should I do this? Should we merge? Should we acquire? Should we do this step? What are the implications? How would this, what are the moral, ethical, commercial implications around making this choice, this decision, this taking this step, this action, right? That's literally what we do day in and day out is we think about the should. And yet for some reason, when it comes to rolling out new technology and AI, we're like, meh, just do it, right? Just get this piece of tech. No, technology can do so many things. It can do so many things, but we really need the lawyers to be thinking about the should. How should we be leveraging this? Where should the lawyers be interfacing with this? Should the lawyers be doing this process at all anymore? Should we be doing this as a firm anymore? There's so many should questions that need to be answered before you just implement technology.
100% agree with all of that, Jana. It's something Anthony and I have talked about on the like on the should bit, and almost like questioning status quo. Like one thing that I think about a lot that's so challenging when I reflect back on my time as a lawyer, it was so hard to question the status quo. Like you're just always expected, like if you say, why do we do this, the answer is almost like, well, it's the way it's always been done. Or it's so hierarchical, it's so much sort of as a junior you're almost put in your place to say, no, it's not your place to ask why. So how do you, if you have found a way to do it already at any of the firms that you've worked in or some of your peers that you've spoken to, how do we do it now? Or otherwise, how can we implement the cultural change that's needed to actually create a safe space for lawyers more generally to actually challenge the status quo?
I think it feels like it's becoming more acceptable to challenge the status quo when I think, everyone's experiencing the status quo kind of go away for all sorts of reasons, right? Like the world we live in today is so drastically different than what we lived in 6 months ago, right? So the status quo is being challenged not just by younger people, but from all sorts of different factors. So I do feel like the culture of law firms is a bit more receptive to thinking about things a bit differently. I do think that rightly or wrongly, I keep hearing, senior partners say, well, the younger generation should be thinking about Gen AI because they're digital natives, right? So I'll leave aside the reason I think that's the wrong way of thinking about that. But the benefit that has is that they then expect the younger lawyers to be able to say, this is how we should be using these technologies. So then that's opening up a receptiveness of, you tell me what this looks like and means for how we do due diligence, like for example, right? So that's shifting the dial. The other thing that, and you hit a big thing there, it's the culture, right? So um, that was something that a lot of innovation people we talk about, right? And I think some people will talk about it in the way of like, it's just the culture. So like, I can just do this, right? My approach has been, for whatever reason, because I'm crazy, because I don't know. How do I change the culture? What does that cultural shift look like? Because actually, to do what I want to do, it requires everybody thinking a bit differently, everybody trying to engage differently, everybody understanding that they need to take part in this change that's happening, right? Um, so, that was the crux of why I rolled out design thinking training across EMEA APAC of DLA Piper. And it was for all of the business, not just lawyers, because it was everyone should be really rethinking of how they can think differently and ask these questions at this point of time. And at NRF, there's, I think a lot of what innovation teams try to do at any firm is you bring in those associates, you have those multidisciplinary teams when you have your hackathons, when you think of the new ideas, so harnessing that energy. Um, and I have seen examples of, because these junior lawyers were the ones to know these topics, to be able to explain how you would leverage technology, they then get to be client facing quite early on, to be brought into that room to do that explanation, because the partners aren't in that same space, right? And they couldn't articulate it because they haven't quite done it yet. So there's a big opportunity there with technology to shift the dynamics, I think, for the lawyers that go on and figure out how to do it and can speak.
It sounds like it almost goes back to what you're saying about the saying at the beginning, which is that you wouldn't have taken the job if you didn't have that senior buy-in. Maybe because that cultural piece is so important. Do you think it could be true that the almost the power dynamic in law firms is shifting, and if a partner's being asked, what you've been doing, okay, well, AI can probably do that now, and you need to give me a new answer as to something that might be outside your expertise, which is that, okay, well, we need to deliver this service in a completely different way, and they don't necessarily have the answer, so they're looking to different people in the firm. Combined with that senior buy-in, is the culture sort of shifting, or maybe even being forced by a changing power dynamic?
Yeah, and especially I think in the last, yearish, maybe less, a lot of our clients are bringing in their own AI and they're using it. So that's forcing law firms to be like, well, yeah, of course I know that I could do that with AI, and I also have prompts for these types of things or tasks. So that is massively shifting the dial, and absolutely, the types of conversations we're having now, and the one of the great things about being at NRF, I've been there for 4 months, so not that long. But I was given the opportunity 2 weeks in to present to the partners conference, the global partners conference, right, about AI and what this looks like. And then it's been a massive open door with partners saying, come in, speak to my client. What does this look like? How do we do this? Is there a way that we can roll out training together where I'm talking about data privacy and security, and your team's offering the technical aspects of how you would roll out generative AI and what it is, and how do we knit this together to be a more holistic educational piece and way of working, collaborating with our clients. So absolutely. Does this look like every single lawyer being bought in? No. Could I even deal with, all of the lawyers at this moment? No. So it's all right. Let's just start with where there's a lot of engagement and buy-in, and there is quite a bit, right? And there's a lot of opportunity. And I think if you asked any innovation person at any of the global law firms, it would be a very similar type of conversation. Maybe not the specifics like I just said, but doors are more open now than they have been. And a big impetus is our clients are literally getting some of the same tech AI platforms that we have, right? So if they're going to figure out how to do it, we better know how to use it too, right?
So if that's what the law firm looked like when I was practicing, I might not have left and started Legatic. Yeah, and super grounded as well. I think sometimes when we talk about technology, we get into this world of the super sort of futuristic pieces, like what's the latest development in the most complicated type of AI engines. And I think asking some of these really simple questions, asking where's the value, what's the why, how do we deliver this, how do we deliver with culture, those are some of the sort of often overlooked questions, and it's sort of really reassuring to me, and I think it would be to a client as well, when a firm really asks those kinds of questions too.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm on the right track.
Thank you so much, Jana. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and finding out more about design thinking and your approach to delivering legal services. And 4 months in, it sounds like it's going to be an absolutely fantastic ride at Norton Rose Fulbright. So thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining us.
Thank you.